and it hits me, oh my gosh, this is that triangle.
You know, there's explanation for everything that occurred in the Rendlesham Forest incident that doesn't involve aliens at all.
It was completely silent. It comes right over our heads.
He saw a classic flying saucer really standing in the clearing.
He turned over to my father and held his hand, and he looked in his eyes and he said, "We're not alone."
Welcome to Podcast UFO for our live show. We're live every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Please remember to visit the website podcastufo.com for past episodes, blogs, and forums. During the show, feel free to participate live in our chat room. And don't forget to like us on our very active Facebook page.
Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Martin Willis, your host, and we have an exciting show. First, we have some guests coming up, but before that, I'm going to talk about the news with Alejandro. He is waiting patiently in the wings, and this has just passed a couple days ago, the 20th anniversary of the Phoenix Lights. So this evening, instead of the guests that we had lined up, Marsha Barnhart, she has laryngitis, by the way. She's rescheduled for the 29th. So I invited Dr. Lynne Kitie. She will be on, and so is the former Phoenix City Council member Frances Barwood that took all the grief during the Phoenix Lights right after the incident. She talked to something like 700 witnesses or something like that. And we also have a documentarian who's had some experiences of his own, Steve Lance. So those three will be on the show this evening. I want to tell you that the Everything Else show that we have, that is now being shared as a podcast to supporters of the show. So if you support the show for $2 or more per month, you get to listen to the Everything Else show as well with all different types of topics. Now, you may wonder why I'm not offering that free, and it's our bandwidth now costs hundreds of dollars a month. So I really can't offer that free, but if you subscribe, again, for $2 or more, you get to listen to those shows too. And you can check out the website. The link is right on our homepage, podcastufo.com, and you can just check out the Everything Else show right by clicking there. Shows are now live stream on YouTube. You can watch the shows live during the show. It's also still posted as a podcast, nothing changes, and also is played on the Dark Matter Digital Network on Thursday nights from 10 to midnight p.m., and that's Eastern Standard Time. So that is it for me. Alejandro, welcome back from Mexico.
Gracias.
You must have had a wonderful time in the sun.
It was pretty great, yeah. The beach was beautiful. Lots of crazy party kids out there, but otherwise, yeah, it was. The beach itself was wonderful.
Yeah, and that's you actually drove there, right? It was 4 hours?
Yeah, I drove. It's only like 4 hours from here. It's my first time there because usually, if I'm thinking of driving a little longer, I'll just go to San Diego, which we go to quite a bit. But this time, we went down to Rocky Point. They have good prices on stuff, and the town itself can be a little sketchy, but the resorts are gorgeous and very nice, and so it was a lot of fun.
Now, is the sand down there like a brown sand? I remember that in Mexico, driving down the Baja.
I mean, yeah, the beaches are very similar to California. The water, seems to is about the same color, and the sand is about the same. Yeah, so it's very nice.
Yeah. Well, we got tons of snow here. We get 24 inches yesterday and last night. So
that's awful.
I'm longing for, going someplace like that. Any place warm actually would be nice right now.
I hear you. I'm from Colorado, and I used to love the snow, or at least, I didn't mind it. But now that I've experienced life without it, I prefer the without it part. And being cold is not fun. But so I'm sorry, my friend.
That's all right. So what's going on for the news this week?
UFOs, dude.
Bring it on.
So, yeah, you mentioned the Phoenix Lights 20th anniversary. So, especially out here in Phoenix, we get a lot of stories on that, including Lynne Kitie. So, on our Facebook, I posted a bunch of those stories. Nothing new, probably nothing much more than you'll hear from your interview, which will be a lot of fun. By the way, Frances Barwood, I think her is one of the most fascinating. Just even though she wasn't a witness, just what she experienced when she tried to investigate what was going on. It's incredible, the whole timeline of events that took place. And she spoke at our conference the first time that we had it in 2011 when we took it over. I was very excited to have her do that. And people can actually view that on our video streaming site or purchase a DVD at our site. But the point is that her whole story is really good. So if people want more, they should check that out. It's just she's a great lady with a very interesting story. And I just think that when it comes to the Phoenix Lights, everybody needs to hear what she has to say.
Right. I know she went through such a hard time trying to get answers, and no cooperation at all. And I think she had some grief in the workplace too, didn't she?
Oh yeah, she certainly did. Which you'll have to ask her about. But yes, she definitely did. And I want to tell people that we posted a video about the Phoenix Lights. We have some interviews with the local Phoenix MUFON people who are great. And this is really cool. This is really a piece of news, is that the Arizona Heritage Center, which is ran by the Arizona Historical Society, has this big, beautiful museum. And they worked with Phoenix MUFON to put up this great display. So they have a Phoenix Lights display there, and we interviewed the director of the museum, and we filmed that display. So you can see that in a video that we posted on Monday at our YouTube channel. So it's just really cool that the Historical Society would document this and boldly, just put up this display.
I think that's great that they actually did that. Yeah. I mean, there's only one other case I can think of that, and that's with Tom Reed. Tom Reed, the Historical Society in his town put a monument. And I know there's also a historical society where the Betty and Barney Hill incident happened too. So
exactly.
There's three of them that I can think of.
Yep. So yeah, pretty cool.
Yeah. So anything?
In other news, Roger Marsh from MUFON posted at openminds.tv a story about a UFO pacing a vehicle in Washington. So we posted something like this not too long ago, where Roger posted a report from 1999 in California where a white orb kind of followed or was in front of a vehicle for a period of time. And this is a similar story. This is in Sikkim, Washington, and this story is also historical. It comes from 1994. But this person says they were driving towards the Strait of Juan de Fuca on January 15th when this incident occurred. They said they caught a glimpse of like a reflection of this object, and then they actually saw it with their own eyes, this green orb that was about 30 to 40 feet from their car and 25 to 30 feet off the ground. They said they think it was about 4 feet in diameter. He notes that he thinks he's pretty accurate because he's a carpenter by trade. But the object kind of moved around into the front of their vehicle, and he was not alone when he saw this. He said his buddy had at one point when he saw it, said, "What the hell is that?" And when he noticed the object, but and after a little while, it just took off at a great speed. It moved so fast that they said they could see a visible line in the night sky. So pretty weird.
Yeah, that's another strange one.
Mm-hmm. And really weird sighting.
Yeah. It has to be intelligent control. That's the only thing I can think of.
Yeah, I mean, if it happened in the way that they reported it, which, these orb type of objects following cars, we talked about this with the California thing, they're reported quite a bit. I know in Colorado, in the San Luis Valley, where I used to spend some time, I had some roots there. Chris O'Brien wrote a book about it. They have a lot of reports of people traveling along those straight, long highways in this valley surrounded by big, giant mountains in Colorado. And it's a huge valley, though. And so as they're driving across it, people say they see these orbs that kind of follow their car for a period of time or fly around their cars. So, yeah, pretty weird. Don't know what to make of that.
Right. Now, so when you said you lived in that area for a while?
No, my family's roots are from the area. I would go camping there once or twice a year, but I didn't actually live there.
Now, did you know about the things going on when you were visiting the area?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I can't think of when I caught wind of the strangeness in the San Luis Valley, but I think when I was very young. My grandmother had a story of, she claims that when she was a little girl, she was playing under the table and some man came pounding at the door. And when they opened the door, he's an excited person with a gun. And he said he had been chasing a 6-foot tall flying mantis around. And so she said, one of the men grabbed a gun and go help him. And that's the extent of the story.
Wow.
So, yeah.
That's a bizarre one. Jeez.
Yeah. So.
Now, I don't know. Is that what first got you interested in the subject? I don't know if we've ever talked about that.
No, I wouldn't say that. It would be other reports and things like that, but that would a little bit. I mean, was open to ideas about the paranormal all along.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, so is that it for this week?
That is it for the news this week.
All right. Well, thanks a lot.
No problem. It's my pleasure. Read more at openminds.tv. And I guess we'll be talking to you next week. You have a good one.
All right. You too. Now for a treat, Mark Stanley is a listener of this show, and he wrote a song Out of the Sky a number of years ago, and we're going to be playing that. It's actually about Roswell. I hope you enjoy it. And here it goes. Stay tuned for our guests.
There's a lightning storm, but there's another light in the sky that night in the Roswell clay. When the sun came up that day, pieces of some machine no one had ever seen. And out of the sky it fell, in July it fell. Don't ever tell. Out of the sky it fell. And in the desert wind, as if it had never been, carried off somewhere what had once been there. Nothing left behind for anyone to find. Not a single trace left from this time and place. Out of the sky it fell, in July it fell, but don't ever tell. Out of the sky it fell. And the secrets that they keep run so wide and deep was 60 years ago. But still, there's so much we don't know. Out of the sky it fell. In July it fell. But don't ever tell. Out of the sky it fell. Out on Brazos fall. Out on Brazos fall. On Brazos fall.
Your calling does not accept unidentified calls.
All right, hang in, everyone. This has happened before, and I did alert Lynn that I would be calling from an unknown number. So let me try again here on another number. She did give me two numbers, and we'll give this one a try here. I hope you like the song.
Your calling does not accept unidentified calls.
Okay, isn't that fun? Okay, I'm going to have to bring in one of our other guests. And let's bring in Lance. And I'm sorry, Steve Lance. That's who we'll be calling right now. And hopefully we won't get the same message.
You are calling does not accept unidentified calls. If you are...
All right, you know what? I'm going to call Francis. I warned all these people that this was happening, and okay. So this is Francis Barwood. Hey, we got our phone ringing, didn't we? Francis?
Oh,
Hi, Francis. This is Martin Willis. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you.
You're probably wondering why I'm calling so early. And I will tell you that I warned both Steve and Lynn that I'd be calling from an unknown number. That's the only way Skype calls, and they both have blocks. So so I'm putting you on now, and I'm gonna tell them, they have to.
I got to get you off my my computer here. Okay.
Okay, you got that? Okay, very good. All right, so let me
here.
You're here. Okay. All right, thanks. So let me just I just have to communicate with them real quickly, and I'm sorry to the live listener, but I just want them to know that I can't reach them.
Well, they may be listening, so they would realize, but...
hopefully.
Yeah, I knew you were going to come through restricted.
Yes. So, yeah, I told you along with everyone. Anyway, so I just have to quickly send this note. And, Francis, why don't you tell us a little bit about what happened during the Phoenix Lights. You were involved in the City Council of Phoenix.
Right.
Go ahead.
I was the vice mayor at the time and knew nothing about any UFO or anything. And I was on my way to the weekly televised session, stopped outside of City Hall on my way in by a reporter named Cindy from Extra TV. And I've never seen her again, which is, I wish I could. And she asked me about, if I knew about this object that flew over Arizona. And I said, what object? She said, well, there was something that flew over Arizona. It went from northwest to southeast, and it was really big. And I thought it was something that had just happened, like, a day or so before that. And so I said, when did this happen? And she said, well, March 13th. And I said, I hadn't heard anything about it at all. She said, could you ask if they could do an investigation in the city? So I said, sure. So I went in and I asked. There's a section of the city council meeting it's called council request, and you can ask anything of any level of government, of anything that pertains to the city or the state. And so I asked if I told them I was stopped by a reporter outside, and I said apparently there was this object that flew over Arizona and on March 13th, and could we find out what it was? And my thought was, this is a safety issue. There's tall buildings, there's antennas, and, if it flew low and slow and all of that was a safety issue. Well, when I asked that question, everything stopped. Everybody turned and looked at me like I had, measles or something. And I looked around, and then somebody cracked a joke, and it went on. Now, the normal procedure would be to assign 2 staff members, and they get back to you within a week as to whatever they found out. And so nothing, right? And then after the council meeting, one of the deputy city managers came up to me, and he said, you shouldn't have asked that question. And I said, why? And he said, because the mayor didn't want anybody talking about this at all. And I said, well, he didn't tell me. And he said, well, yeah. And there was kind of a thing down at City Hall when the mayor would tell me something that was, I thought, wrong for my district or for the citizens of Phoenix in general. I'd say, I'm sorry, I can't agree with that. And he'd say, well, you have to agree with it. And or you're not going to get whatever project I had pending in my district. And so I learned early on that when something like that happens, you go to the news media and you tell them. And so I did. And so eventually he would not tell me anything he didn't want out there in public. And he didn't tell me that. And so I asked the deputy city manager if he could find out why they didn't want to talk about this. I didn't think a UFO or anything, right? And so he didn't get back to me, but unfortunately, about a week later, he passed away. And so everybody kind of treated me with a lot of ridicule. I had the mayor's office posted a sign on we had all our pictures in the hallway, and he posted a sign on my picture that I came from the planet Xenon. Oh. And then him and his staff were handing out business cards that I was given sent one by somebody I knew in the mayor's office in an inter-office memo saying this is what he's handing out everywhere. And it was a business card said, Frances Emma Barwood, speak into the tinfoil and she will hear you. Oh. And he was handing these out at meetings, and it was like, wow, it's that thou dost protest too much type thing. And then there was the cartoons in the paper, and, had a rocket going in one ear and out the other. And there was another one with Dr. Spock. And there was a third one that I forget what it was. But it was like, wow, they're really trying to make me out as some kind of a weird person. And all I'm trying to do is find out whatever this object was. Well, then I started getting videos of the news that night on television, all the news shows. And it was dropped off at my office, and it was signed Dr. X. And I thought, this is really strange, right? So we were watching them one night. I thought, well, okay, while I'm reading through my weekend big book to get done by Monday for the meeting on Tuesday, I'll start, going through these videos. Well, I have to tell you then after that, on Friday, this was May 6th, was the meeting, May 6th, 97. And on Friday, was it the 9th, the reporter Chris Fiscus, who had the city beat, came in and said, I'd like to interview you, and which happens occasionally. And I said, sure. And he said, I want to talk to you about this object. And I said, do you know anything? And we had a very interesting talk. First of all, he told me that the reporter was referred to the city council by the sheriff. And because he, said this is not, a sheriff's thing, this would be the city thing. And they tried to get every other one of the city council members to talk to her. Nobody would talk to her except me. And I didn't even know why I shouldn't have, right? Mm-hmm. So then he did this whole interview telling that his mother and sister saw this object that his mother said was not from this world. And he said, if my mother said it, it's true. And he did this really good article, which came out on May 10th in the Saturday paper. And the reason he did it that way was because he used the weekend editor, because the weekday editor would not let him do the story. So before I even saw the paper, I started getting phone calls at 7:00 in the morning that Saturday, the 10th, and they continued all day long until 11 o'clock at night, and then I took my phone off the hook. And my number was always published, so it's like nobody ever abused it. And so then Sunday, which was Mother's Day, I started getting calls 7:30 in the morning, all day long, Mother's Day till night. And I kept writing down everybody's name and number and what they saw. And then Monday, I went into the office, and my voicemail in my office was full. So people were leaving messages on all the others, voicemails. And by law, they had to give them to me, so they did. And it was really astounding to me because over that summer, which our break was the end of July till August, and until the end of August, I started calling them back, and I called over 700 people. And it was really amazing because everybody described the same thing. They said it was bigger than a football field, a mile wide. It was low. It was slow. It was obvious. There was absolutely no noise, no hum, no nothing. It had lights on it that were gaseous. They didn't shine down. They just kind of glowed. And they all said they were amazed, astounded, excited. Nobody said they were terrified. So if anybody was, they didn't call me. And it was, they said that it was something that they'll never forget. And it was like, wow, that night on May 13th, I was down in the middle of the city in a meeting, and I was driving north on the same route that it was going south. And it took the most populated route from northwest Arizona, I think from Nevada, all the way through Arizona, the most populated route you could pick. So it wanted to be seen, whatever, why. And at a time of night where everybody was out jogging, there was Little League playing, the people saw it, the parents saw it, the kids saw it, the people who, coached saw it.
Wasn't there a comet, people watching a comet too at the time?
They're up here in Paradise Valley. There was a Hellbop party, and they were all outside, and they were, watching Hellbop, and they were having a good time. And they all stopped because they sensed something over them.
Wow.
And they looked up, and they saw this object, and they watched it, and it was really low, they said, and very slow. They could see the shape. They described everything exactly the same, the kind of gaseous lights traveling south, and they watched it until it was out of sight. They went back to their party and forgot all about it until the article came out. And that's what almost everybody I talked to said, that they just forgot about it, and they couldn't understand it. And I'm thinking, how could you forget something like that? Mm-hmm. Well, I had an experience a year later, about a year and a half later, in November of 98, And we were listening to Frank Baranowski on the radio, local radio down there, The World Around Us. And somebody called in and said, "Did you see that thing in the eastern sky?" And he said, "No, but the security guards here did." And they said, "I need to go out and take a look at it." So I said, we were in bed listening to him because he was on from 10 to midnight. And so my husband and I said, "Okay, let's go out." And, so it was chilly, cold. And we went out and looked east and kind of positioned it between the twigs on the tree, which were bare because it was cold, no leaves, and stood there, and it did not move. It stayed there, and it was a huge glowing cylinder tipped to the left on the top, and we thought, that is really strange. So I called my friend who lives in Scottsdale, and I said, "Go out on your balcony and look to the east, and what do you see?" And I woke her up, and she came back, and she says, "Oh, my God, what is that?" And I said, "I don't know." And she said, that's really amazing. Well, the next Thursday, we're driving down the street and going shopping, and we had the radio on, and it had an advertisement for Frank Baranowski's World Around Us. And I said to Mike, "Do you remember we saw something last Saturday night in the east sky?" And he goes, "No." And I thought, I must have dreamt it. And then I called my friend Patty, and I said, "Patty, do you remember us seeing anything? Did I call you last Saturday night?" She goes, "Oh, my God, yeah." She forgot about it. Wow. Then my husband remembered. And so it's like the only thing I can think of is all these people whose memories were awakened, so to speak. Is it because it's outside our parameters of understanding? Was there something, like don't pay attention to us or we're not here to hurt you? I don't know. I just don't know. But since it happened to me, and I understood, for some reason, all these people forgot about it until they saw that article. And then the videos I started getting from Dr. X was of all the news shows that night when they were talking about this object. And on one of them, Sergeant Mike Torres, who was the spokesperson for the Phoenix Police Department, was at the police department, and they were, live shot. And he said, "We were overwhelmed with phone calls about whatever this was." And I said, "What?" Because I had just gotten the memo that said there were no phone calls to the city, to the police, and an official, memo saying that. And I'm thinking, "Oh, wait a minute. He's saying they were overwhelmed, and this memo is saying they didn't get any phone calls. Something's really wrong here." So that's when I ended up finding out that Dr. X was actually Dr. Lynne Kitie, but she waited a little bit to tell who she was because, she didn't want to have, ridicule. Mm-hmm. And so she got all her ducks in a row and came out that that's who it was. And I said, you look at all the people involved in this, all the people that it has changed their lives. At first, I thought it was a military thing, but we know a couple of pilots that would not talk about it until they retired, and they said that is nothing from this earth. Wow. And I do have faith in these people to be very aware, and the same with the governor. I've known Fife and Ann Symington for a long time. Great. Fife is extremely intelligent. And I had referred people to him. And then that July, he was, if you go backwards, he bucked the federal government because they were going to close down the Grand Canyon. And he said, "It will destroy all the businesses in the Grand Canyon. I'll send the National Guard down there." And they told him he couldn't do it, and he was going to do it anyway. And as it turned out, they then backed off of closing the Grand Canyon. But then he was doing the Esplanade in Central Phoenix, and they said that he fudged the figures on his application. And it was like, what? He's a multimillionaire. And it's like, something's wrong here. So we all figured, well, that's their retribution against him. Well, at the time that all this was going on with the Phoenix Lights, he was in court fighting what they were doing to him. And they were going to put him in prison for, fraud and all this kind of stuff. And it was, I really do think that it was total intimidation to show others don't buck the federal government. But while he was in court, they had a break, and he went to a Child Help USA luncheon, and they had reporters there. And then one reporter said to him, "What are you going to do about this object that went over Arizona they're calling the Phoenix Lights," or he said something like that. And he said, "Well, we're going to investigate whatever it is." He said, "This is something that infected a lot of people, and we're going to investigate." Well, when he got back to court, the people who were there watching this trial said that he was called into the judge's chambers, and he never came out. And in the meantime, they announced that he was going to do an emergency press conference at 5:00. And so we saw that, and I thought, oh, something must have happened in the state, so because emergency is emergency, right? And he held that press conference, and out walks his chief of staff in this, the E.T. costume. And it was like, what? And first of all, I know Fife, and I'll be the first one to tell you, he does not have a sense of humor. There's no way that he planned that in a million years. You could tell him a joke and a bunch of people standing around laughing, and he wouldn't get it. So, I knew right then and there something was really wrong.
Wow.
And my theory right at that point was, I bet they're going to drop the charges because they made him do this. And sure enough, they dropped the charges. I haven't been able to talk to Fife, but I totally understand what he did. Here he had a wife and 6 kids at home, and the federal government going to put him in prison for trumped up charges that are nonsense. And, what do you do against the federal government? So they gave him, you do this, we dropped the charges. He did. And then after he was out of office, then he could say, what he saw. And I really sympathize with him, because I would think that he held that in knowing he could not talk about it at all at that time.
Wow.
And it must have been hard.
Really? Well, that's an aspect of that story that I never heard. I remember someone mentioned something about him possibly having a fraud charge, and they only said that it was a skeptic that was on my show in the past. I think it was Michael Shermer. The only reason that he mentioned that at all was that he was kind of downgrading Fife Symington's testimony that he actually saw that thing go over him in the park. He was saying, why would you trust him? He had a fraud charge against him. So, it's just unbelievable, convoluted.
Well, and you have to look at why did he have that and what he did prior to that. And, it's because I knew the whole, chain of events. And I know that Fife Symington is a very, how can I put this? He wouldn't do something that would be against his own integrity. So, it got really strange with the federal government with the whole thing, because, how do you fight the federal government?
Right.
They come down on you. What do you do? It's very few lawyers will take on the federal government. And now, of course, this is my theory of what happened, because I saw it every step of the way. And I know, that there was no way in the world that he planned that press conference, as stupid as it was. There was no way. So that's my theory of what happened. I tried once to talk to Fife, and he was really embarrassed and kind of exited himself because he didn't want to talk about it, and which was odd in itself, because I've known him for a long time. And you think of all this stuff, and you think, well, what? It's again the thou dost protest too much theory. All the people I talked to, well, and then, there's Richard Curtis. And Richard Curtis, my phone number always in the phone book. And I get this call one day in July, and he said, I got some video of that object, and he said, I have professional CB equipment and professional video equipment. I'm a disabled vet, and that's my hobbies. And he said, I was listening to the truckers driving south on I-17, and they were talking about this humongous object they were following, and that it was going so slow and low, and it was something they've never seen before. And he said, so I decided to go up on the roof and videotape it as it would be coming down. And so he said, I got one videotape, and it ran out, so I put another videotape in there. And he said the reflection from the streetlights in Phoenix showed this very dull kind of gunmetal color object with these gaseous lights, and it was just moving so low and slow. He says, I really got a good picture of it. And I said, wow, it's amazing. And he said, would you want to see it? And I said, yeah. And I said, can you make a copy and get it over to my office? So got busy with, city stuff and everything. And I didn't even ask, I figured they'd tell me when they got it. And then about 2 weeks later, he calls me again, and he said, well, what did you think of the video? And I said, I didn't get the video. And he goes, well, the two men came from your office. And I said, I don't have men in my office. I have women. And he said, well, they came here and they got it. And he said, they came to my door and asked for the tape. And I asked if they were from Barwood's office. They said yes, and I handed them the tape. And he said, they asked me if I made copies, and I didn't make copies yet. And they said, oh, we'll just get copies to you. And they left. And I'm thinking, oh, this is baloney. This guy just, took me down the garden path. Well, then one of the investigators from the village labs who did the spectrogram on the lighting and stuff, he went over there to check this out. And he went into the lobby, and he talked to the manager and the minister who counsels with the residents there. They were in the lobby. And he told them about what had happened. And he said, do you know anything about this? And he goes, well, the weirdest thing, they saw this car pull up, and it was a black car with black windows. These two guys got out, three-piece suits and hats, and they came in and asked if we could tell them where Richard Curtis's apartment was. So we told them where it was, and they went up there. And they said that, it was so odd that they remembered it. And it was like, holy cow, they verified what Richard Curtis said. Well, then Richard Curtis was on television, and they had asked him about all of this, and he told them the whole story. And then right after that, he had a change of medication, and the other residents said he got really sick, and they came and took him away, and nobody ever saw him again.
Unreal. It almost sounds, someone had mentioned Men in Black. It almost sounds like that type of situation. The men in the suits and the blacked out windows. Yeah, that's weird.
And it was 110 degrees that day, and that's why they thought it was so odd that these guys were in three-piece suits, black suits, with black hats. And they just thought it's so odd that they were dressed what they would consider extremely warm. And, just the whole thing was just really strange. And so, apparently these videos that were really very good, defined videos of this object were gone. Now, there was one television station just recently said, oh, they were flares, and that's all that was. And, well, flares don't go 400 miles horizontally and no smoke. And, you look at the whole thing. So I've changed my opinion. And in the Bible, where it says, in my Father's house there's many mansions, the original text says, in my Father's cosmos there's many worlds. And I guess they just didn't want anybody to know that. I don't know. But, I'm a Christian, and it's, to me, it's biblical. And why not? If God created the universe, he created the universe. Why do we think we're the only ones?
Yeah, I think, that's definitely the issue that a lot of people, in science even, I think there's fear issues somehow. There's a great old saying that if we're alone or if we're not alone, both ways are frightening,
The other part of it is, if we're the best there is, oh my God.
Yeah.
So
I hope not. So this, when you were talking to all these 700 people and you were trying to get some action, what other pushback did you get?
Well, let me go back to the Richard Curtis thing. I didn't know how these people would know who I talked to because I didn't tell anybody. And so we had a friend who's a private investigator, and I said, the only thing I can think of is my phone is tapped. So he had a friend who can check out the lines. He worked for the phone company, and he checked out our lines out and inside. Then he went outside. Then he went along the whole line things to that, whatever that is out there. And he would not come back in the house. And he knocked on the door and he said, I did not come here. And he said, I want to tell you that you have a tap on your line that goes to the central office. It is always government. And he said, it's always federal government. And he said, you don't know me, never saw me, and he left. So he was really frightened what he found. And I'm thinking, wow, they're listening to everybody I talk to. Isn't that really interesting? So then I'm thinking, okay, so all these people, these over 700 people that I talked to, and the government or nobody ever questioned any of them, which I thought was also really odd because if they're not questioning anybody, they already know. They just don't want us to know, which is interesting. Now, with this whole thing, it's like, I don't think there's anything to be afraid because, if we go to the nearest planet, they said it's 40 light years away. Well, if they can manage to come here to observe us and say, oh, they're still really primitive and take off and go back again, or examine people like they did with Travis Walton, they're way advanced. And, we're thinking of our technology, which it would take 40 light years to get to a nearest kind of habitable planet. Well, that's not their technology. They've probably found something better. I mean, who would have thought I'd be talking to you on a cell phone that I could carry with me and, have things on the internet and everything is in cyberspace? Who'd have thought I learned on a manual typewriter. Not in a million years would I have thought this. Yeah,
I mean, so much has happened in such a short time, and can you imagine what 1,000 years from now will be like? We have some questions that came in for, basically anyone, Lynn or anyone else on the forum, and this one I thought was pretty good. How do you respond to people that say that the Phoenix Lights have long ago been debunked as nothing more than military flares?
Well, they did a comparison, and I thought it was hysterically funny. They did it on television. They had a split screen. One half was the video that Dr. Lynne Kitie took. The other half was the flares that they set off in a line. Well, the video that Dr. Lynne took was moving very slowly horizontally. These flares were in all different speeds of dropping. They were flaring. They had smoke. They were uneven. Nothing in a line at all. And they said, "Oh, that looks just like that." And I'm thinking, really? Are they looking at what I'm looking at? So yeah, no, it was not flares. And again, flares can't travel over 400 miles horizontally and stay in a perfect line.
Yeah. Okay. Another thing is when you were trying to figure out what was going on, how much of the groundwork did you do? Did you try to contact places like NORAD or any other places, to find out what they had for radar or anything like that?
Others have done that, and they denied anything. Mm-hmm. And I sent a letter to Senator McCain, and he sent that to Lansford Trapp, who was the director of the Armed Services, and that went nowhere. And he just said I was a constituent. He didn't say I was, the vice mayor of City of Phoenix or anything. And so then I waited a while. I got no response. I sent another letter saying, you promised you were going to investigate. He did on television. He said he would investigate. Never did anything. And which is typical for him anyway. But so I sent another letter, and I said, you said you were going to investigate, and I would like you to investigate. Signed it as the vice mayor of City of Phoenix and all of that. Nothing. So I called the office, and they said at first they didn't know about this letter. So then I had my assistant call the office, and they said, oh, yeah, he did do a letter, or he sent the letter she sent, and he sent it to the National Archives. And I thought, well, that's known as the big, trash can, big better trash can in the government. Mm-hmm. So then I had my assistant call the National Archives, and they said after much time, yes, they did get my letter sent to them by Senator McCain's office, and all they do is file. And she said, could you send me a letter saying that that's what you got? And she said, we don't do that. So she said, can you just write it down on a paper and fax it to my office when we had faxes? And so she did that. She just said that they had received my letter from Senator McCain's office, and that they put it in the archives. And that was that.
Wow. Now, didn't Senator Kane do some type of, didn't he talk about this a little bit, or was that another situation?
That was prior. No, that was prior. Uh-huh. It was, around the same time that the governor said, we're going to do investigation. There were people who asked him, oh, yeah, I'm going to check into that. Well, he never did. Ever did.
Now, when you were speaking to these 700 witnesses, how demanding were some of them as far as like, I need to know what this is? Or did they just, was it more curiosity? Or did people get pushy about it?
Well, I'll tell you, none of them were pushy, rude, anything. And I'll tell you, there were two people that called me. One is a very famous entertainer, and one was said he was in a large company in Phoenix and couldn't tell me his name. Well, the first one told me who he was and said, I do not want you to tell because I don't know how people would react to this, but I wanted you to know I saw this, and it was the most incredible thing I've seen in my life, and I'll never forget it. And he is still around, and I won't tell who he is. And then the other person, he did not want to tell me his name. And I said, well, then I'm sorry, but, I'm not going to listen to anything you say because anybody could be calling me. So he finally made me swear I would never tell. I said, listen, I've held secrets so long in my life that I forgot what they were. So not to worry. And so he gave me his name and his company, and he said, I make six figures and I can't lose my job. And I said, not to worry. The next day, I called that company. I asked for this person who was vice president of the company, got him, he answered the phone because I told who I was. And I said, I'm just checking to see that was really you or it was somebody pretending to be you. And I said, I'll never tell. And I never did. And I never will. I haven't even told my husband, haven't told my kids, nobody. And the thing is, they just wanted me to know what they saw. They actually really kind of risked everything, but they had to unload what they saw. And everybody that I talked to just wanted me to know what they saw. And they all described the same thing. There was one kid that came out and said that he was on a telescope that night and saw these 6 planes in formation. Well, that's the one that they gave publicity to. But here's the thing. Planes don't fly in formation at night in the city. It's like, do not do that ever. And so, but that's what they wanted somebody to say. I don't know, how that came about or anything. But when you've got of these over 700 people that I talked to, some of them were like the people that were at the Hale-Bopp party. That was 27 people there, and there were people that were out at the Little League games, and so everybody was with other people. And so we figured out, by the amount of people they were around that saw it, and people on the freeway that stopped their cars, and everybody got out of their cars, and we figured it's probably around 10,000 people here or there. And you think that object did the most populated pathway, and here I was going north when it was going south, and I never looked up, and they all described the same thing.
Wow. Dr. Lynne is going to be calling in 5 minutes, and the way this Skype is set up right now, I can't have 2 people on. For some reason, it's not letting me join people. So when she calls, I'm going to have to say, about 4 minutes from now, when she calls, I'm going to have to say goodbye. I wish I could have you on for the whole show. It's been really, really interesting. Now, you mentioned that that all the people you spoke with basically said they saw the same thing. There are some stories that there were different type of vehicles spotted. Sort of like the boomerang one, and then a solid object all the way through. Did people have those 2 variances?
No, they may have been the same. They may have seen something different. But the ones I talked to, it was all the boomerang shape. Mm-hmm. It was low. It was slow. It was obvious. It was completely silent. There was absolutely no noise. And the other amazing thing, with all the people they were with, they all stood in total silence watching this thing. Nobody was, looking or talking or anything. Some of them, were pretty excited and did. But for the most part, they just stood there in awe. And, I wish I would have seen it, but I have no doubt that what they saw was something very real. There may have been others, they said, and they could have been other crafts, because who knows if it was just one. So many people saw. It's just, you can't get 10 people to agree on the same thing. And here, all these people described exactly the same thing. Right.
Wow. Yeah, and the other variances, I've heard some people say a football field, some people say a mile. I remember there was one of the witnesses that said it was from peak to peak on these 2 mountains, so it was like a mile apart. So whatever it was huge.
It was huge. Yeah. And, we couldn't get anything like that up in the air. And
not that we know of anyway. Yeah.
That we know, yeah. But, here it is. It's been seen all over the world, but other countries are much more open about it. And they just say, oh, yeah, well, that's probably something from another world. And it's like no biggie to them.
Yeah.
Why is it such a biggie to us? And you look at the Vatican, they put this humongous telescope down on Mount Lemon, and, Father Malachi said the reason is because the Vatican wants to be able to know when they come.
Oh, really? I've heard there's one of the astronomers that does talk about they think that there is life, which I think that is pretty open-minded, compared to, times past. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah.
And just to let you know, I'm probably going to have to interrupt you any second now.
Okay.
I don't know if you'd ever want to come back on again. This is, I just feel like we haven't got too far in the conversation. And let me just, while we have a minute here, what has happened since with you? Has that ever haunted you? Well, she's calling now, so I'm going to have to say goodnight. So thanks so much.
If you want to call me back later, that's fine.
Okay.
Take care.
All right. You take care.
Thanks.
All right. Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So that's it for the free part of the show. And if you want to listen to the full show with Dr. Lynne Kitie and also Steve Lance, all you have to do is subscribe for $2 or more a month. And that also includes the Everything Else Show podcast included in that subscription. And thanks so much for listening. Our guest next week is John Burroughs of the Rendlesham Forest. And thanks again, and remember to keep your eyes to the sky.